thank you so much for sticking around for a panel on touring. My name is Tyra. I work with the Calgary Folk Music Festival. I'm a festival hall venue manager there, and I'm going to let these other folks introduce themselves before we get into the conversation. So, can you two kind of introduce yourselves and talk about your relationship to touring?
My name's Juliana, and I run a festival called Project Nowhere in Toronto. I'm also an artist and have toured in North America and Europe and UK. And for 4 years, up until last summer, I was also a booking agent at a company called Mothland. It's a label agency, does some management, and I was running like the boutique agency portion of that.
Yeah. My name's Rose. I took Juliana's job at Mothland, so I'm now the lead booking agent, the only one. I work at Mothland on the label side also. We also program a festival called Tavern Tour in Montreal and a festival called FME in Rouyn-Noranda, which is deep, deep Quebec, far away. I'm
Hmm.
also in a band called Mulch, and yeah, we've done a couple runs, and I book a lot of runs, and we book a lot of runs.
Yeah.
Everyone's touring.
I also book a 300 capacity venue in Toronto called the Garrison.
Amazing. Great. So we'll start off with asking when, as an artist, do you think is the right time to decide to go on a tour?
I think I think that has changed a lot in maybe the past few years. I think that timing is really important, and what that is for different artists is going to vary a lot just based on like logistics and how many are in your group, how feasible is it for you to tour, even just like lifestyle wise. But I think pretty early on, doing like regional touring is a good idea. It's kind of low pressure, low risk, and a good way to sort of like get a feel for touring and get an sort of a feel for the interest in the project without sinking a huge amount of money into visas and like complex like logistics planning. And then from there, I think continuing to build connections. You can you're sort of looking for an opportunity to like take you somewhere rather than just sort of looking at a region or a territory and being like, oh, I'd like to like go there, or I'd like to go there. um, More than ever, it's difficult to do that because of how expensive visas are, how expensive it is to get over to Europe. I think just sort of like aligning it with your release cycle and an album you're putting out that has some press around it and has some you're generating some awareness about the project before you're really embarking on a very expensive or like lengthy tour, I think.
Yeah, I think like early on doing regional like you said is great. Like I think well obviously I'm in Quebec, but like even doing like 3 day runs in like Ontario or Maritimes or just around like is a great way to build connections with bands and people doing things out there. And then later on when you're ready to book something like bigger or more lengthy, you can be like, hey, like remember that time we played together? Like you got a spot for me? Like you got a thing I can do? Um, but and then yeah, anything before an album is also great. Anything right after an album is also great. Yeah, like what you said mostly. But,
Great.
yeah.
Um, yeah, and when you finally like sat down and you're like, okay, we're going on a tour. This is happening. We've decided. What are kind of the important things to consider in the first stages of mapping your tour out?
I When I started booking like very DIY tours for my band, it was really based on um there was some cold calling to venues of like, but mainly like the sort of anchor points of a tour, where like maybe it's a festival offer or even just like a show offer that's a decent sized guarantee that you can kind of build around. Or sometimes the anchor is even maybe it's a hometown show that's going to kind of like fund the tour if you have some momentum there. um, I would say like building on existing connections is really important, like Rose was saying, like connections, especially connections with other artists. but if you have connections with promoters or venues, like that can also be great. I think starting with the people that you know that you don't have to cold call, and sort of building, that'll kind of start mapping it out for you. If you're like, I know somebody in Edmonton, and I kind of like know somebody, like, you came here and you met like somebody in Boise. You're starting to like map out the sort of like West Coast, like, oh, I met somebody in Spokane, and like now I'm like just filling in the blanks from there. So then from there, you're kind of like, also you're asking maybe those people, do you know anybody in the area or between this and this city where that, the people will have regional and, partners or friends or people that they know. And then I think from there, you just kind of like fill in the blanks. But I think starting with building on the connections that you already have, artists that maybe you played with in your hometown, that you gave them a great show. You're kind of like calling in that favor now. You're going and being like, hey, I'm coming to your city. Like, do you think you could set something up for us? Hopefully, if they're cool, if the timing lines up, then they'll help you out there. So I think having those sort of like, we call them anchor points, and touring is pretty important. And then that's like, I guess, like in terms of like mapping out the routing, and then there's like, more logistics to consider, but I assume we're gonna get into that later. Yeah.
Picking a place is good too, like picking a thing you have in mind. Like, we love going to the Maritimes just because it's a great place to be. So it's like, if you're like, okay, I want to go to the Maritimes, like, great example, my band's trying to go there in April. Who do we know over there? Motherhood, perfect.
Mhm.
Hit him up. What do you got for me? And they're like, we maybe have this or this. We're like, perfect. And then you can build around that with, obviously, like, it's easier, like, bands come to Montreal all the time. So it's easier to be like, oh my God, Montreal show, Halifax show, whatever, but just picking a place, because like touring is the coolest thing you can do as a band, because you get to go places and do the thing you like to do like 4 days or 3 weeks in a row. And so like picking a cool place to do it that you want to go to, and then just like getting in the van, like, gotta just be like, do it.
Sure.
It's like get in there.
With like a DIY tour and planning your own tour, there's lots of like financial things to consider. How do you ensure as an artist that your touring is financially responsible?
You can't.
Yeah, it's a
I
good.
don't.
This was a part of the like description of this like event or of this panel that was like how to like make a tour like successful and like financially successful and not like a crash course in chaos. And I was
Yeah.
like,
You,
I
it's
don't
gonna be.
know the answer
Like, you
to
make
that.
shirts. You
Uh,
make shirts. You bring the shirts with you. You beg people to buy your shirts. Hopefully, they didn't cost more than like $7 to make each. Sell them for 20. Like, hope that you can maybe recoup. But if you're like the first tour you're gonna do, like, you want to start small, or you're gonna lose a lot more money than if you started really big.
yeah, I think like going back to the sort of timing being really important, is like a tour where your band hasn't put out an album in 2 years, and there hasn't really been any sort of awareness or hype generated recently. It's going to be a lot more difficult to break even on that tour. It's going to be a lot more difficult to sell tickets. It's not really fresh in people's minds. I think, if you're a Canadian artist and you can access grants, touring grants are very competitive. There is a Factor showcase program that has a whole list of eligible showcases, including Sled Island, including Pop Montreal. There's a huge list, and if you're 300 kilometers away from any of those are like a pre-approved one. It's not a huge amount, but it's a great starting point for anchoring a tour where you have a little bit of financial um, stability. It does, if you're going to the States and you're getting that showcase grant, it's barely going to cover your visas, let's be honest. And then that's a whole other logistical hurdle.
Yeah.
So, but other grants, like touring grants, like do explore those opportunities, see what's out there, if you can, Canada Council, look at your provincial arts councils. Sometimes there's even municipal arts councils. For us, we have Toronto Arts Council, Ontario Arts Council. Ontario Arts Council does have a tour program. Factor has like opened up their tour program recently beyond the showcases, so that you can apply for tour funding for any artists. Start applying. I had a grant writer tell me to like start applying for those when you even have like an inkling that you might be touring in the future. You can start applying for those with even like they all have different requirements, but sometimes it's just like interest from a promoter, or like as Eric and other folks here that are based in the States have, have no problem writing you a letter of
A border letters that you don't have to be
yeah, a
daunted
letter
with
for
getting
the
visa
border
for it,
just
yeah.
to be like, yeah, I'm interested in booking this artist. You can apply for those funding opportunities and then kind of just like see how it goes, and even see there. You can't really count on grants. It's just like not it's just not how it is. But you can start early and then find out 5 months later you got the grant. Now maybe your tour plans from what you wrote in the grant have shifted a little bit, but that's okay. Usually you can have like 2 years to complete that tour. So then you just have that funding for when you need it. So like explore those opportunities. Like, yes, it's work, but there's grant writers around if that seems like too daunting of a task for you. And that is something we're very fortunate to, have access to. Depending on the kind of band you are, they can be
Yeah.
really hard to lock down as someone who's in a weird band. I don't love that. But you might as well try because it's out there, and I think that's a huge like kind of it's an advantage that we have that is because we're sort of at a
Yeah.
disadvantage in
And
another
like, I
way.
mean, specifically, like Quebec has also like a really, really intense grant system for French bands, and there's a very like specific ecosystem for those. But they do like the entire like Franco industry is basically run on like these grants, and like without those, there wouldn't be like a touring industry in Quebec and an export industry. So they're worth looking into, and like they're annoying because you have to have done your taxes and like you have to look into them and do them. But they're the main way that like Mothland gets to send bands out on the road. They're the main way that we're able to go do these showcases that are definitely not profitable, but that are worth it to go do, and then still recoup a bit of funds from those. Even if it's just the flights, it's like better than nothing, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And what are some ways that you can kind of like reduce the risk of like incurring unnecessary expenses when you're on tour?
I think just budgeting realistically if you're going over to Europe and you're looking at you know expenses like obviously you need flights. That's kind of like a non-negotiable one that you can cost out pretty easily. And trying to just book those at the right time, get the tour booked early enough that you're not booking last minute flights. You'll probably save a few $1,000s not doing that. Usually you're renting a van and some backline, and that's like a per day fee, so you can also cost that out pretty quickly. And just like pad your expected budget because a lot of unexpected things happen on the road. And if you're driving, if you're going down to the States, like, you have a visa expense, you're going to have a good amount of gas, you're probably going to need to sleep somewhere. Hopefully people help you out, but like prepare for, needing to sort your own accommodations out and get an idea, like, because I think a lot of people just kind of go on the road for the first time, not really expecting it to cost much, but you are, especially in North America when there's, hospitality is very limited, usually to a few beers per night,
Yeah.
which is not really doesn't really sustain you as a human on the road and as a working person and artist. So I think just getting an idea is like, okay, how much is actually this 3 weeks going to cost us? Padding in some like, yeah, like we might also need an oil change. We might also have some van problems. Like say we got hotels every night. Just get a realistic idea and then sort of look at, okay, maybe we're not getting enough in just like guarantees, and maybe we're estimating. Don't overestimate how much merch you're going to sell. You don't really know. um it's different if it's a support tour and there's set fees. You can get a better idea of like what your revenue is going to be, but really for first tours most of the time it's pretty up in the air. So if there's a huge gap between your expected expenses and your expected revenue, then maybe you need to come up with that money somewhere, or kind of already have it in the bank or in the band fund to bridge that gap, so you don't come back totally just in way in
Broken,
the
like
hole
done, and like yeah, tired.
and just sad. If I mean,
Yeah,
but like you have to have
you
that
have to
money to
have the
invest,
investment is
like,
the
because a lot
thing.
of you
Yeah,
can't just like come at it. A lot of these bands, like even as just personally, are not like don't have that kind of money to, maybe embark on a tour and then come back. Max credit cards, and it's just not a
yeah,
great place to be.
no,
But yeah, but it's true. Like it is an investment, and that is sometimes how you do it. But I guess the idea is to like minimize that.
minimize the loss. I think if you're like getting the van, also like one thing we've definitely neglected a couple of times is just like budgeting for gas. Like, you don't think about budgeting for gas, and you're like, these places are freaking far away from each other. Like,
Yeah, North
especially like
America is.
North America is big. Like,
Mhm.
you can leave Montreal, drive 12 hours, and still be in Quebec. Like, that's So you need to like budget for gas and you need to just make sure that like the routing you're doing makes sense. Like you got to go on Google Maps and I do this all the time. Like obviously like if we're getting offers for bands anywhere, like you go on Google Maps and you go, okay, if we're going that far, like what can I build around there without like driving back and forth constantly? Like if your furthest date is Halifax, like what can you do that makes sense that you're not going back on your own like routing and you're not going on the same, yeah, you're just you gotta look at the Google Maps.
Mhm.
It's honestly pretty fun, like, you get to go like, "Oh, play here, play there," and then maybe, like, it makes more sense to do this city before that city, so you're, like, saving, I don't know, $10 on something, but, like, that's $10 you're gonna have at the end, like yeah.
I'd like to talk a little bit about like teams of people who you're bringing along with you on your tour. Obviously, for budgeting reasons, it's probably wise to do a bare bones approach. But are there situations where it's worth investing in folks outside of the group or outside of the
For
artist to help
sure.
out?
I think, like, for a first or a DIY run, like, you don't have to bring anyone, or you can if you have the extra space and you're not if you're more than 4 in your band, don't bring anyone with you, like, on a, like, DIY routing. If you're 3, you can pull off having a 4th guy who, like, just wants to come hang out and do merch for free, and then you're like, "Yeah, come on down, come on down." But when it starts being realistic is, like, we work with Population 2, which is, like, a prog rock Montreal band, and they just went on, like, a 3-week US tour with Frankie and the Witchfingers, and they had a tour manager with them, and just having somebody who's looking at, like, where you're going every day, somebody who's driving that's not in the band, somebody who's helping you load in and out, and somebody that knows where you're going and what the tour book says can be really useful when you're trying to focus on, like, playing the shows, and especially if it's 3 weeks and it's a show every day, like, you're gonna be tired, and having someone who can take care of that for you and take care of the merch, like, usually, like, if you can get a tour manager who can drive and sell merch, like, that's the one person you need. Sometimes they can even do sound, and then you're like, "Yeah, come on down, like, we'll pay the visa," like, it's super valuable to have. But for anything DIY, like, you don't really need someone, and if you need someone, it's like a buddy who's just tagging along or, like, a girlfriend.
Yeah, I think that like that hybrid role is probably the first like kind of support tour support person that most bands will have. That just so you know, obviously just that's just budget. Um, and I think like what that person does really depends on the needs of the band. I think it varies from artist to artist. If like for a support tour, you definitely want, you know, if you're playing, you know, ideally pretty, you know, to a few hundred people every night, you definitely want to have somebody at the merch at all times. That's a really valuable thing to have because it's going to be a huge part of your revenue because support fees are not very much. So you're probably going to make like 80% of the money you make on the tour basically from merch. So you need that. If you're a band that has like, you know, you find that your technical setup is a bit more complicated, and it's really important for your vision to come across that you know the average you know tech at the shows you're playing it seems like it's just like a lot and it's becoming inconsistent, then maybe you need your own sound person if that's going to give you that peace of mind. But if you're like a punk band that's just plugging straight into
Yeah.
everything and it doesn't matter, then you don't really need that. I think also just like identifying like the support you actually need. You don't need somebody to do everything. If everybody in your band drives, you might not need a driver. I mean, it's nice, you know, if you can afford it, but like if one person in the band drives, like it's definitely something to consider in terms of like exhaustion and
Well, you
viability
said
of
on
the
like the needs thing is good, and also like sometimes depends on the band. Like if you have a person in the band that's organized and who like there's usually like one who's like organizing the whole thing, and like
It's the bass player.
it's it's you're for you it's the bass player, for me it's me, you know. But like if you have somebody who's organized enough that you don't really need anyone, like great. Like we obviously like I work with a bunch of different bands. Like I have a band who like always wants their own light tech because the light is a really important part. Like we have some bands who are just like so not organized and not able to do it. So even just for the label to be like, we're giving you a tour manager so we don't have to hear from you for the 3 weeks you're in Europe, like where you're not hitting me up every day. Like we have like we have 3 bands in Europe right now, but 2 of them like we have Truck Violence, which is like a punk band. They're on their first like UK tour, and then we have like La Sécurité. They're like pretty established. They're on this big opening tour, and like Truck Violence doesn't have a tour manager with them right now, but that's okay because they're just like 4 punk dudes, and they're just gonna get in the van and go to the gig. Worst thing they need is maybe we'll get like a message from an Airbnb we booked for them for like Wi-Fi or whatever. But then like La Sécurité, they're 5 people. We know how they are, and like sending a tour manager with them is like gonna give us peace of mind. which is pretty important for us because we could do a lot of things.
Mhm.
And just yeah, kind of yeah, identifying the needs of the band, like your own band or anybody else's band.
For sure. When you're on tour, how do you promote yourself in foreign markets effectively with a limited budget? And how do you keep momentum in marketing while you're on tour?
I think it's a good one because, like, like you obviously have your Instagram account, but the people who are following you are probably locals. I'm personally not a big fan of DIY bands having like meta ads or TikTok ads because, like, I'll see them and I'll immediately scroll through because I'm like, I don't want to see the TikTok band personally. But if you to like make relationships with the promoters that you're playing the venues at, or the promoters who are putting the show on for you in a different city, um, and really like being on the ball about having show posters, like the other panel was saying, or like on posting every day, like we just played this gig, we're playing this tomorrow, like da da da, and getting like the people from over there to share it and do it with you, or even just having someone in the band that you're like, you're gonna be posting on the internet for us, so that we don't forget to do it, because it's easy to forget because you're doing other things,
Yeah, I
you're
think
enjoying real life.
yeah, I think local support is going to be
Yeah,
your main one when you're playing in those other in the unfamiliar markets. Like you're working ideally with the promoter of the venue to book local bands that are going to bring some people out when you like aren't established there yet, and you really want to lean on that. So and ideally, hopefully maybe you've in some of these places you've built some relationships with artists, like we were saying earlier. That's where that really plays in. If they're kind of somebody that can bring 100 people to a show, and I think it's also something to think about when you're being asked to open shows locally for touring artists. Like, where are they from? Is it not like you're like using them for something, but yeah, obviously maybe it's also
a
cool that
little
you want to
bit.
play.
Yeah,
But it's like something to keep in mind. Like, if you kind of throw someone a favor in your hometown where you can bring some people out, ideally, if they're they might return that favor. So I think like local support is obviously I think like the main one for early on, and the right promoter will know those bands and be able to get them on a show for you. I think good artwork, sending over a blank version
yeah.
of your tour poster, it's called an ad mat, and the promoter or the venue will fill in the details that's specific to that show and kind of give them the opportunity to promote that locally, like digitally or through print. And like yeah, ads, like I think it really depends on, I guess, like what kind of like assets you have. If you have like some very dynamic video assets and you have the budget to do a little campaign like in each city, that's cool. I think most DIY artists like don't really have that as part of like a tour budget. I also think like like you said, like if there's not anything recognizable, if it's not a super attention catching video, it doesn't have any like relation to there's no local support on it. It is something that most people are just gonna like scroll past, and it might not be worth the investment. But yeah, there it can be. I think it can be useful depending on what kind of media assets that you have. If your band is a very like you know you have like a very distinct look and it's a very engaging live show and you have live video, maybe that's a good thing to invest some money in. But if you're just like kind of like
Just a
dark
band.
and you're all like
Yeah.
standing there and you're like, here's our show, it's like
Like, yes, there's 40 other of those. Like,
don't bother.
For sure. So you're on tour. Uh, it's exhausting. It's such a slog. How do you ensure that touring is sustainable for you as a person and
yeah.
like your mental health? And how do you avoid burnout when you're on
I
tour?
think routing is very important. Like we've had bands do like 40 days, no break in Europe, and they come back and they're like demolished. Takes them 3 months to recover, and they're like, I never want to go back. I think if you know you're routing a long tour, trying to give yourself like a day off between shows, if the drive is like 10 hours, like you're not gonna want to play a gig when you get there. Sometimes you gotta, and that's okay, but like if you have the leeway to like
seven
route
hours or
it,
less. Like
yeah,
I just like a day, like seven
yeah.
hours or less.
7 hours or less, like unless you really have to, but like
Yeah.
routing them, and also like really taking the time once you get there to like chill out and be like, okay, we're here, we're playing a show. Like it's easy to get stuck in the like in the van, get to the venue, load in, sound check. You're waiting around for 3 hours. You're playing, you're loading out, you're getting back in the van, you're going through your outcomes, you're sleeping, starting over. Like it's good to like maybe take 3 hours to walk around or sit down in the city and like make sure you see something. Like a lot of the times you're like playing these cities and you're like, I didn't even know that I was in this city yesterday because now I'm in this other city. So trying to like do that and also trying to not fight with anybody in your van.
Yeah,
Like try to
yeah.
like because like when you're cramped up in a van, like it's easy to start hating each other. Like and you're like, why aren't you washing your feet? Like why does it smell so bad in here? But like just take that inside of yourself and chill about it and don't fight in the van because it's going to be awkward for everyone else.
Yeah, I think well, I think like that all comes as like I'd say like choosing the right people to tour with. Like sometimes you start a band and maybe the intention wasn't even to tour or to like to go on the road and to try and do the thing and you're just like playing with people that are like, locally, maybe you don't even know them that well. And then I think it's just like something to consider when you're going to that next step is like, sometimes like the small things that like those little kind of like two people that are always at a little bit at each other's throats in rehearsal, like
Yeah.
now suddenly is really everything's like going to be on a magnifying glass. That person that like has a couple too many beers at a show here and there, now like on tour when that's available to you every night, it's kind of turning into a problem. And I think so. I think being on tour with just people where you all respect each other and can in some way kind of be on the same level is really important and be obviously beyond that if you can just like obviously try and have a bit of extra patience. I will say keeping I think I always say that like music and touring is one of the only jobs where you're encouraged to drink on the job on a daily basis, and I think
You don't have to.
you don't have to. Just because it's free doesn't mean you have to drink it. It is fun. There is a lot of like friends or like special occasions. I think keeping partying to a minimum, especially like early on when it's very hard on your body and you are like sleeping on couches and not having a lot of those like comforts is a good idea. And you'll get better sleep, and that's important too. And just like trying to eat somewhat
Yeah, eat
okay.
a vegetable.
I mean, go to the southern states and like they really don't make it easy. I'm not gonna lie. Like they're not giving you much for
But like eat a
vegetables.
vegetable. Even
Like
if
try and
you're,
find try and find a banana at a gas station and like do that. I think just like taking care of your body
yeah.
in a situation that is really like kind of encouraging you in every way, especially in North America, to kind of just do the opposite
To
and
go
be
to
a
the en route,
complete
yeah.
heathen, then just kind of making a conscious effort. You'd be surprised at how much better you feel, how much better you play, and how the viability of the actual group.
Also, I think we've both like kind of realized like having a like a 20-minute before you go on stage where you like
Hmm.
lock in either with the rest of your band or alone, like depending on whatever.
Hmm.
Where you just kind of like lock in and get into the mindset of like, okay, we're gonna play a show. Like for me, it's like vocal warm ups and like stretching, so I don't like. Well, I do hurt myself, but like so I like don't hurt as much the day after, and like also just like making sure like my hair looks nice or whatever. Like just like a 15-minute like pre-show ritual
Hmm.
to like get in the zone of like, okay, we're not in the van anymore. We're playing a show. Like if we were fighting, maybe we stop now. Like
Hmm.
if you got yeah, so a lot of you kind of figure it out and find out. Another big thing is when you come back from tour. Like I know, especially for me, like even if it's a week in the Maritimes, like you're spending a week doing the thing you love most, which is like being in the van with people you like playing shows and like meeting people and you're getting all these like this crazy dopamine hit. And then you get back home and you're like alone in your room and no like nobody really understands what you've been doing for 5 days. Like and you're like back at home in your bed and you don't really know. And like for me, it's really hard where I get really like depressed because I'm like, oh, I was doing the thing I wanted to do. Now I gotta go answer these emails
Hmm.
and I don't want to. So just like making sure you have sort of like a after tour ritual, or even if it's just like hanging out with one friend because you've just been hanging out with the same people for like a week. You want to get out of that. But yeah, I've really been more conscious of like coming back from tours or even just like a week long event or even this. Like I'm sure I'm gonna get back home tomorrow and be like, oh, that was fun. Now I'm just back at my house.
Hmm.
I gotta like go to work.
Totally. And I want to get a little bit more into like post tour things in a moment. But I wanted to ask, just kind of relating to this like sustainable mental health sort of thing. If you play a really bad show,
Yeah.
how do you get over that and then go and play another show the next night? Like, what do you guys do
Um,
for that?
you will play bad shows, and that's okay. Um, that's just okay. Like you just have to
Yeah.
be like, Don't spiral. You're on tour. That's cool. You're living the dream.
It's not really your fault.
There's all kinds of
Yeah.
bad shows. There's shows where you play amazingly and nobody's there. There's shows where everything goes wrong technically and there's a ton of people there. There's like all kinds of ways you can do it. I think just there's sort of, I think in time, also just with experience, it's a resilience that you build up. You will see successful bands get off stage after a show where everything has gone wrong and be actually in pretty good spirits, and you will almost never see a successful artist get off the stage and be like, oh, like that fucking sucked, or like you're like great show, and they're like, oh no, it was a disaster. Like they just like have the mental resilience to be like, this happens. That wasn't the best representation of the band. Oftentimes those like technical disasters are things that you look back at as like these like things that you like had the mental fortitude to get through and finish the show. And sometimes like even like some like I think that sometimes like the best opportunities like come from the worst shows. Like someone wants to book you in some place, and like I saw you here, and now I want to book you here, and you're like,
really?
all right,
Like that show? Okay.
cool. So you just have to like honestly let it roll off you. You can have that sort of moment. Honestly, also I would say like 95% of the time it's not as bad as it felt
think,
to
yeah.
you. And yeah.
Great. Yeah, so to follow up, this is kind of my last question, and then I'll open it up to the floor for some questions from the crowd. You've completed your tour, finished everything off. What metrics or signs are you using to track a tour's success beyond just profit?
Ooh. I think connections are a lot of it for like my band at least. Like because obviously I do like book these more like official things with like work, but like my band we're very DIY in the spirit and like the booking of it. Just like the connections. Like we played Ontario, we met some crazy good people there and like some really great bands. Like I love like playing a gig and being like, wow, that band rocked. And like I would have never heard of this band if they weren't like sandwiched on this bill. And then I mean sometimes Instagram followers or like whatever, you're like, oh, we gained a bunch of people. Um, but then a lot of it is like calculated in the next time I go there, what can I do better or what's gonna like change now that I've done this that's gonna make it like I don't know. Yeah, it's hard to say, but connections are a big one. I think
Yeah, I think
the
those
people and the
those like quantifiable metrics like your Spotify monthly listeners and your Instagram followers, like those things going up is obviously a good sign, and everybody knows to
look out for that.
look for those. And but I think there are situations where I think for say an opportunity like Sled Island, the first time my my band played that festival, it was pretty early on in us like touring outside of Ontario. The next time that we decided to just kind of like book a tour across Canada, it seemed like everybody in Western Canada was like, "I was at that one show like at Sled
Yeah.
Island, and I saw you there, and now I want to like, and now I'm down." So it gave me some context to like what your band is like, and I remember just being kind of like shocked at like at how many people just like came to that one show, and I was like, what a great festival. This has really like opened like so many doors of this entire unlocked basically this entire region
Yeah.
of Canada for us. And then since then it's always actually been a real like Western Canada has been really really supportive and a great region to tour for us. So that I think is just like you were saying, like coming what happens kind of the next time you come through, how you can build on that. And then also I think like with the first time we went to Europe, we lost a whole bunch of money, and the shows actually were pretty good. It just was really expensive, and the grants just didn't really come through. But it was an experience in like the hospitality and the sort of accept like people's willingness to take a risk on a band that they've never seen before. That was really actually inspiring, and I think good for morale for us. Like in Europe, like a place to stay that is comfortable and like a full like meal and sometimes even like a breakfast like before you hit the road are like the basic standard there. And so going there and doing say even 30 days with only like a day or 1 or 2 days off is actually the drives are shorter. The whole thing you're just kind of like, oh, this is like nice, like this is like
You're
luxury.
like I know why European bands don't come here because why would you?
Yeah, you don't.
They're
Yeah,
chilling over
God,
there.
if you have to do that the other way around,
Oh, can you imagine?
it's upsetting. But starting here and then going there, it's like especially like doing these like states, these tours in the states that are like
awful.
really like schleppy. You're like going over there and you're like
Sleeping on floors.
well, you go to Europe and then it's also just like, yeah, we lost all this money, but like the morale is great. We feel so valued as artists. We really feel like people are excited about what we're doing. We got so much like good feedback and like that honestly felt like it was worth it, even though there was a financial loss. Like it still felt worth it in like a sense of it made the band very excited to like, continue playing live and
And
doing
you got
those
to go to
things.
Europe, like
And yeah,
baseline,
you're
like
like,
baseline. You're like, I'm in Europe, like I'm chilling.
yeah,
This is fun. I'm traveling for
everything is
music, like
beautiful. It's crazy.
yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, so that's all my